Um, so
Okay, thank
first
you.
of all, that's for individual stocks. So my answer to that is buy and hold is dead. I mean, no long-term investor, plans on not changing that portfolio. So you are going to trade a little bit. So the second one is, what about buy and hold, let's say a market ETF or fund that owns the market? And many people will say you shouldn't do buy and hold because, you're going to have to suffer through like a couple of years. Maybe the market's down. And so why would you hold that? Rather put my money in the bank. I'd rather put my money in bonds or something like that. But the problem is that you have to, first of all, predict before the market falls. You can't predict after because you've already lost the money. So you have to predict before the market falls. And then once the market falls, you have to, and then you have to have the guts to get out at the peak of the market. So you have to have the timing and you have to have the guts to get out. Then you have the next problem is that you have to figure out the bottom. That's also hard. And this really requires guts because when you're down at the bottom of the market, the problem that you're going to face is that you're going to feel like you're going to lose your job. You're going to feel like the whole world's coming in. You're going to feel like you can't afford to make payments on, like all the negative stuff comes together at the bottom of the market. And you have so much fear. And then, my sister's business is doing really well in America during the mortgage boom. But what about her daughters? They're out of jobs. They need money. So all of a sudden, it doesn't feel this easy to allocate at the bottom of the market. So you have to be able to pick the bottom of the market. You have to have capital available at the bottom of the market, and you have to have guts to do it. And so most people don't have these skills, and including me. I mean, it's hard for me after 30 years. So the point that I would make is that from a perspective of long-term investing, probably makes sense just to keep building and doing like a dollar cost averaging into an ETF as one strategy, and then building a portfolio of stocks, as another. So those are some thoughts that I have on that question.
Okay, cool. That does make sense. Thank you for the insightful answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the problem is that authors can be misleading in making it seem like it's, simple when it's not. So, or easy or something like that. All right. And Mitchell, I see you're on. Hopefully you are doing well. Yeah, just working. Okay. All right. Why don't we get started? We're going to do a recording of this and then we'll share it into the group. So I'm just going to do a little bit of discussion about the upcoming election in the US and what does it mean for us. So let me share my screen. Hold on one second. This is it's one part of a big strategy report that we're working on. And because I don't have any recommendations in this, it's okay to talk about, it. So before we've gone out, but we're going to go out tomorrow with this. So members of the group will see this before. But basically my prediction about US politics is that we're going to have what's called a lame duck presidency after the Republicans win slim control of Congress. And these are all the topics that, I mean, this is a mega report. It's about 100 pages. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but I'm going to highlight some of the interesting things. And I would just say, here is the situation we have in America right now. And that is that the Democrats control not only the presidency through Biden, but also the House and the Senate. And that means that they can do pretty much anything. And in fact, Biden has put through legislation related to infrastructure, climate, stuff related to gun control and things like that. And basically, this map I created to try to show that the red states in America have been losing power over time in the Midwest and the Northeast. And the result of that is that a lot of power has shifted to the South and to the West in America. And basically, my final conclusion in this section is that the election is a fight to the death for Democrats to hold this slim House and Senate majority, which is what they want to do. But I think they're going to face tough competition. Now, this survey that I recently went through gives us a picture of what matters to people in America. And the first issue that matters to people in America is inflation. Nothing is more critical than inflation. In fact, 48% of Republicans say that inflation is the #1 issue. And that's different from gun violence, which is the #1 issue for Democrats. And that is only for gun violence, 22%. So really, inflation is the main issue. And men care more than women about inflation. And whites care more than blacks about inflation. And as far as gun violence is concerned, women care much more about gun violence than men. And blacks care much more than whites about gun violence. These are pretty much the two top issues in America right now. And if I was a politician, I would be really trying to get elected on my response to these two items. So after that, I went into the second group. And here, what we can see first for Republicans was inflation. And second for Republicans is immigration. The first for Democrats is gun violence. And the tied for second is inflation and abortion. These are the main 4 issues in America. And I'll skip through part of that, but what's happened in America is the Supreme Court has overturned a law which basically allows states to ban abortions. And now they can do that. And the result is that the states on the left have been setting up bans on abortions, and the states on the right are where abortions are legal. And more of them probably will move from the legal to the ban. And now abortion is going back to the states. There's a lot of people who are like independent people, independent voters who may vote for the Democrats because of that. Now here we have, next issue is climate change and election laws. These are 2 major issues. And they're issues only for Democrats. Republicans don't care about climate change compared to the Democrats, and Republicans care more about election laws than the Democrats. And final issue, and this is an interesting one. One of the lowest priority issues for Americans is Russia, Ukraine. And my point is that Zelensky is probably going to be abandoned at some point by Americans. So basically, what I would summarize in this section is that Republicans will vote to solve inflation and immigration. And Democrats have no hot button issues like this. Remember that the inflation issue is a super high issue for Republicans. Democrats care most about reducing gun violence, but Biden's Congress has already made some progress on it. So it's unlikely that's going to really get Democrats out. And independents may swing a bit towards Democrats to secure abortion rights, but much more towards Republicans to solve inflation. They see the Republicans as the party that can solve inflation. So Republicans are favored to gain seats in the House mainly due to this inflation issue. Now, I'm going to just go through a couple of things here. And what I'm going to focus on is that these 2 charts, what we can see is that in the United States, the majority of people now believe that the US is already in recession. And so this is an economic issue that will encourage people to vote for Republicans. Here we can see majority of Americans think the economy is worsening. We can see somewhat worse and much worse combined are the majority. So also, what I would say is that these are the different issues right here. And if we look at this, I can say that both Democrats and Republicans don't trust US elections. And they want clean voter rolls before the election. And they think that the federal government has lost control of immigration and school education. This is both Democrats and Republicans. So again, immigration comes up as a second issue. The Republicans are focused on inflation and immigration. And I would argue this is part of the reason why it's very likely that we'll see a swing. So there's 8 issues that voters care strongly about, and they all favor Republicans. So the end result and the bottom line is Republicans seem set to gain votes on nearly every issue that Americans care about. So if we stop this presentation right now, we would say the Republicans are going to win the House and the Senate, where the majority is only about 1% towards the Democrats. But now I want to highlight a couple of things here. This is an article came out from Time magazine. And this article came out about a year ago to try to explain how the Democrat Party, together with the elite, basically manipulated or overthrew the election. And I won't go through the details, but I'll go to the summary, which is a well-funded cabal of powerful people worked together behind the scenes to save democracy from Donald Trump and his supporters. They influenced perceptions, changed voting rules and laws. They steered media coverage. They got millions of people to vote by mail and controlled the flow of information. So the bottom line is the Democrat Party has used its media and tech influence and could do it again, but Republicans are more aware of their antics, so it may not be as powerful. So question I have is, what type of people would manipulate democratic elections? Well, okay, in Thailand, Bangladesh, or in Philippines, or other places, we would expect it. But would we expect that in America? Meet Sam Harris. He's the author of the bestsellers, The End of Faith and Waking Up. He's a podcaster. He's a famed Trump hater. And he's a self-described liberal. So Sam Harris was recently interviewed on trigonometry, and he made some revealing statements. This was on August 18th, just recently. Here's what he said about the Hunter Biden laptop story being squashed before the election. He said, Tiboho's come on, so I just want to go back to this point I was making here. We're talking about US politics, Tiboho, and I'm talking about this guy, Sam Harris. And here's what he said about Hunter Biden's laptop story being squashed by Trump versus Biden before the election. He says, that's a left-wing conspiracy to deny presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely. But I think it was warranted. In other words, you can suppress information to get the people you want in power. This is the type of person that would overthrow democracy. And here's something he said. My argument is that it was appropriate for Twitter and the heads of big tech and the heads of journalistic organizations to feel that they were in the presence of something like a once-in-a-lifetime moral emergency. He's like a black hole, meaning Trump, of selfishness. So there's no telling what he's going to do. We cannot afford to have 4 more years of this guy. This Sam Harris is the type of person that this article here that I was just showing you, the article by Time magazine, is talking about and how they manipulated the last election. And he gives you a picture of how they look at it. So what's the key points? Left-wingers believe a conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump was warranted. Sam Harris felt it was appropriate because the US was facing a once-in-a-lifetime moral emergency. Hence, he and his followers felt that the country cannot afford to have 4 more years of Trump. The bottom line, some elites in the Democrat Party feel justified in destroying democracy to save it. To me, that's a bit terrifying. Now, I want to introduce you to this guy, Robert Epstein, and this is important. This is important not only for America, but also for South Africa, for Thailand, and for elections across the world. He's a senior research psychologist and he voted for Hillary, and he's not a big Trump fan at all. According to him, Google's methods are ephemeral, meaning they only last for a very short time, and they leave no paper trail. And they can manipulate us in ways that we cannot counteract. He tracked, his team and his researchers tracked Google's invisible, almost subliminal tools, including its search engine manipulation effect. And they found that biased search results can change people's opinion and voting preferences. So just look at the right, I typed in US presidential election, and you can see the things that start to come up. What starts to come up is determined by Google. And here's something. In the days leading up to the 2020 presidential and 2021 Senate runoff elections in Georgia, for instance, his research team preserved 1.5 million ephemeral experiences and more than 3 million web pages, which was sufficient to shift at least 6 million votes in the presidential election without people's knowledge. Now, let me stop sharing my screen to explain what these guys are doing. This professor basically is getting people to allow him to put software on their computer for research purposes. And the software on the computers of different people, of thousands and thousands of people, are taking snapshots of what's on Google when they use Google. And he's preserving those snapshots of what those people are seeing. Then he's asking them whether they lean more liberal or conservative. Are they more left-wing or right-wing? Once they've identified themselves, then he's taking snapshots and he's asking the question, is Google giving a different experience depending on a person's political persuasion? And his research says absolutely yes. This is terrifying. And this is one way that the Democrats, and Google's focus is on supporting Democrats, not Republicans, and definitely not Trump. So that's how the team is doing it. And they've done a lot of research. And basically, he thinks that 6 million votes would have swung to vote in Biden's favor. And because Biden won 81 million versus Trump 74, that this could have swung the election. And he believes that in the election for Hillary Clinton, that it was 2.6 to 10 million votes that were swung towards Hillary Clinton. It was only because Trump had pretty much the highest vote turnout, of any president, that he was able to win. Now the next thing is very fascinating. They have something called Go Vote. And it's a reminder that Google puts on a Google page on election day. And Epstein found that it gave one political party, meaning the Democrats, an 800,000 to 4.6 million votes compared to what the other party got. He said that Google's Go Vote prompt was not a public service, it was a vote manipulation. This is the type of vote manipulation that is the example of what I call differential demographic effects. Now, this goes back to great research that's being done on the concept of nudge. If you get a nudge email on a regular basis to nudge you to do something, you're as much as 50% more likely to do it because of that nudge. If you don't get a reminder email, you can forget about it. So what they're doing is they're identifying conservative and liberal, Democrat, Republican, and what Google's doing is putting Go Vote on the Democrat side, on the computers of Democrats, to nudge them to go out and vote. And they're not putting it on the side of conservatives. So they're not nudging them to go out and vote. And he makes his estimate of how many people this influences. So this is one of the ways that they're doing, and it really, really, it's kind of terrifying. So he suggests this: get rid of Gmail, get rid of Chrome, switch your Google search engine away from Google, get rid of an Android phone, avoid Google Home devices, and use a VPN. I just thought that's valuable information for all of us. But let's summarize what we can learn from this research. Google's power can control public policy in elections. Google could have shifted 6 million votes without anyone's knowledge towards Biden in 2020 and about the same to Hillary in 2016. Its go vote reminder on election day 2018 likely gave the Democrat Party an extra 1 to 4.6 million votes. And Google may have been determining up to 25% of national elections worldwide since 2015. Who is Google going to support in Italy, in France, in South Africa? This is going to matter in the future. So the bottom line, expect Google to continue to support Democrat Party candidates in the midterm elections, reducing the Republicans' gain. So from the presentation, I've already highlighted that the issues, the hot button issues, are really issues that matter for Republicans, and people believe that Republicans can solve those problems. So without the interference of media and without the interference of Google, I think that the Republicans could get a big win. But with these things that are very common knowledge out there, it's just going to be harder for the Republicans. So what I want to do now is just try to kind of wrap it up. And Biden gave a speech recently, and it was a fascinating speech. And his objective was to isolate Trump supporters and get Republicans and independents to vote against Trump. Now, I went through this whole speech in a lot of detail. I took all of his words on the left-hand side, and I tried to summarize them on the right-hand side. And I went through the whole thing. I even made a video and I shared it with you guys in the group. But let's get to the bottom line. Here's what he said. President Biden's speech in Philadelphia on September 1st attempted to isolate Trump. He said it's not a normal time, that democracy in America is under threat from MAGA Republicans, and they're taking control of the Republican Party, which makes that party a threat to US democracy. And he goes through and talks about that MAGA Republicans are authoritarian extremists. They believe in using political violence to gain power. They reject the US Constitution. They reject the rule of law. They reject the will of the people and the outcome of the elections. This is all what Biden said in that speech. They're dangerous, sore losers and conspiracy theorists who won't accept defeat. And they're undermining US democracy and preparing to overthrow the 2020 midterm elections that are happening in November and the 224 presidential elections that may be Biden against Trump. He goes through all of these things, but the final bottom line is Biden attempts to isolate Trump supporters through this speech and to rally Republicans and independents to vote against Trump. But it could backfire because as I read this speech to my mom, she said she never heard any politician talk in this way of demonizing the opponent. So this is the final part that I'll highlight, and that is the odds are against the president gaining in the midterm. In this case, Jimmy Carter, he lost his Democrat Party that I have as a D here, went from 17 to 14. Reagan had a shift from 6% Democrats to 12% Democrats. They're opposing Reagan. Bush lost seats in the House. Clinton lost seats in the House. It was only George W. Bush that gained, but he didn't gain much. But all the others, Obama and Trump, lost. On average, they've lost about 8% of the seats in the House. So if we just look at historical precedent, then Biden is going to lose seats in the House significantly. And so history tells us that Democrats, 1% control of the House and Senate, could switch to about 8% for the Republicans. High inflation and a weak economy is swinging voters towards Republicans. But big media and big tech support for Democrats could stem that tide. So finally, to wrap up tonight's presentation, this is the breakdown of the House and Senate. You can see that the Democrats have a 50.3% hold of seats in the House. Now there's 5 seats that are others, which I haven't included. But in the case of the Senate, we know that the other 2 people, Bernie Sanders and one other, always vote Democrat. So Democrats have a 51% control of the House, of the Senate. My prediction is that the Republicans are going to go from 48.5 to 52.6 in the House,
meaning they're going to get a majority, and they're going to go from 49.5%, a minority in the Senate, up to 50.5%. And the result of that is that I believe that the Republican Party is going to gain seats in the House. So Republicans barely win. We expect Republicans to win 1 to 3% majority in the House and Senate, and they will try to tackle inflation, stem immigration flows, and ramp up energy exploration. And this means that oil prices and gas prices could come down if the Republicans win. It could be part of the reason why oil prices and gas prices are coming down right now, is people are anticipating the Republicans may win. And Biden will still have veto power, which means we could face what would be called a lame duck presidency for years. So I just wanted to share this work that we've been doing. We spent a lot of time. The research is not just politics. There's other parts to it. But I thought that the politics is something that you want to make sure you understand clearly. Are there any questions or comments? So the impact. Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. Hello, Andrew. No, I just wanted to ask, so was the, I think, incredible work that you've done, and it's quite horrifying to see the extent to which the big tech is prepared to go to manipulate the elections. But I just wanted to ask, so what was the implication for asset allocation that one might think of when looking at these various permutations that you have put? Do you say one must go for energy or what? Yeah, just interested to know.
So our allocations right now have not changed. 25% equity, 25% bonds, 25% commodities, and 25% gold. And if I'm right about this, it's possible that the commodities don't perform that well, because I think the Republicans will try to fire up oil and gas production in America. And just the start of doing that will cause oil prices to come down. So the first thing is that if my prediction is true, I think one of the first implications is the impact on commodities. Now, in one of our other strategies that's a little bit more active, that strategy, we have reduced our commodities exposure because of this. This is one of the factors. So from an investor's perspective, I would say it could be that this, and remember that oil, particularly oil, but let's say oil and gas, account for about 60% of the total commodities, individual components of the commodity index. So if oil starts to really come down, then it's going to have a significant impact on commodities. I mean, as far as stocks are concerned, part of the problem that you're going to face is that America is going to have what we call a lame duck president, where the House and the Senate, if they're controlled by the Republicans, will try to put many bills and get votes from the House and the Senate on things that they want to do. But Biden will have the veto power, so he can just reject it. So it's not like just because they get control of the House, they'll be able to do a lot of stuff. So that also is kind of a negative as to why it's not going to cause the market, let's say, go racing up, because there's a problem that Republicans can't get done what they want either. And to answer, Sora Witt asked, does the economy and stock market perform better under Republicans, significantly lower inflation? Are there any studies or robust correlations? I don't have any studies myself, and I probably looked at that a long time ago, but we may be able to find something on that. But I would say generally, first, voters believe that Republicans can solve economic and market problems better than Democrats. So what happens is in elections, if economy becomes a big issue, then you normally would think that independent voters would swing to Republicans instead of Democrats. That's the first thing that we generally see. And then what happens is that, think about Trump as an example of a Republican. One of the things he did is cut the corporate tax rate. That caused, earnings to rise for all the companies. And it also caused, the stock market to rise. So generally, I would say economy would be for Republicans, but we can look for some studies. Mitchell says, if Democrats maintain a majority or increase it in the Senate, but have lost the House, will that, in your view, be worse or better than if Democrats hold both or Republicans hold both? If we get a majority of, if the Democrats can hold on to their majority in the Senate, which is, I would say that's where consensus is right now, that the Democrats are going to hold on to that majority. Now, remember that that's based upon polling. And there's a lot, what we learned from polling previously was that Republicans are less likely to answer polls. And now that Republicans are being called extremists and authoritarian and enemies of the people of America, basically by Biden, I think you get even less willingness to speak their mind about politics. And if that's the case, then the surveys that we're seeing showing that the Senate is going to be held by the Democrats could be skewed and not necessarily correct. And I'm going to make a bet on that. And that's the reason why I'm calling that both the House and the Senate are going to swing to Republicans. Now, I think the worst case is that Democrats hold on to the Senate, but they don't hold on. Republicans get control of the House. With the Senate and Biden, there's nothing the Republicans can do. The only thing the Republicans can do is set up the committees within the House and then have lots of committee debates and discussions and invite people in and investigations and all that. But they won't be able to get much going on. So we will have a particularly lame duck period of time, because also remember that many of the most important bills, like spending bills, must originate from the House of Representatives, not from the Senate. So if the House doesn't, make it happen, the Senate can't make it happen. So I think that the worst case for America would be Democrats hold Senate, Republicans have the House, and Democrats have the presidency. All right, any other questions? All right. So to what extent are American voters concerned about the stronger relations developing between China and Russia? Do you think voters, do the voters think Biden is strong enough to address this? I think that right now, the voters in America are already believing that China is the #1 enemy, and that the Department of Defense in America has already put it on their website as part of their long-term strategy, that they see China as their #1 enemy in the world. And I would say that probably we have some statistics that I was looking at of surveys of Americans, but the majority of Americans believe that China is a very serious threat. And so, and I don't think that Americans care whether they're pushing Russia to China or not. I think Americans think that their power is so strong, and people love America and they love American democracy so much that they're going to follow along. And therefore they can push China around, they can push any other country that they want around. And they may even appreciate, that country may even appreciate being pushed around. So I just don't think, and there's very smart people at the Senate or at the State Department in America, but they're not really thinking and let's say acting smart. I don't know if you saw the Blinken, the Secretary of State, which I would say is, not an impressive guy, in my opinion, went to Africa. And he was really scolded by one of the ministers in the South African cabinet, I think it was, I don't remember, but it was a lady, just ripped him apart. It was pretty interesting. I don't know, did you see that, Tiboho?
Yes, I did. The lady's called Naledi Pandor. Yes.
Naledi Pandor. So she really let him have it. Very, very, she's a very smart woman. And he just fumbling around and just thinks that America, that people are going to, and this is part of the reason why I feel like Africa is the next hotspot, because you've got currencies devaluing, you got inflation going crazy. You don't have great productivity when it comes to growing food, and you're reliant on import of gas and other things to produce fertilizers. And without that, and they're rising quite high. And I would say African governments aren't really equipped to be thoughtful in what they're doing to some extent. And they're just getting exposed right now to pretty horrific forces of inflation and currency devaluation. I think Nigeria is kind of one of the ones that's just awful, when I look at them. And what's going to happen is America is going to come and try to help some way or another, thinking that they're helping. And they're going to find China's there. And what they're going to find is that, and we looked at a survey in our last research that showed that they surveyed people in Africa about their perceptions about China and about the US. And really, it was pretty interesting to see that people that they surveyed in Africa in various countries, on average, saw the US and China about equally as far as, their opinion of the two. I think if you ask the average American which they would think that, they don't care about the Chinese, they care about Americans. They care about America, America cares about Africa. But what's going to happen is that, Africans can see that China has been investing. They may not like everything about the Chinese, but they've been there. And America is going to come on the scene and find out, holy crap, China is deep in Congo and other places, getting natural resources, working with companies there and doing things the way China does it, but the point is that America is not going to find that very pleasant. And then I don't think they're really going to know what to do with Africa in this case. So that's kind of my hypothesis, but what's your thought, Tiboho?
Yeah, I find it a very perceptive analysis, Andrew. I think my view is Americans are probably going to be concerned once they see the lessening effect of the dominant dollar on the global economy, because I think it's going to affect their economy and even their national pride, as they see other countries taking an alternative path, especially now that the dollar as a global currency reserve is under threat. But I think I believe this is why the deep tech, I call them the deep tech, and I'm even more convinced after your analysis. I think this is why they're ramping up all the fears and the manipulations, because they can see that really coming. Yeah, that's just my view about this.
And when you think about in countries in around the world, the Democrat Party controls big tech, and the people in the Democrat Party and to me, the Democrats are
kind of the worst type of people. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican because I don't believe what Republican Party stands for either. But the Democrats, the one thing that I don't like about them is that they really think they're doing good. They're really trying, they really believe, you know, morally that they're really doing good for other people. And in fact, they're just making themselves feel good, but they're not really helping others. I would rather work with a capitalist that says, I'm here to make money. You make money, I make money, we make money, it works. I'll follow the laws and the rules, whatever, but it's just a much more direct thing than to say, okay, I'm here to help you, you know, overcome your problems and all that, you know. Anyways, that's just my opinion. I've got to run. I'm going to be on a panel with the other former presidents in prior presidents for CFA Society, Thailand. Tiboho, what I really would love to do is I really want to start talking to more people in Africa and different countries. And I really am interested in what's going on there. And I would love to make some trips. So hopefully I'll have that in the future. We'll see you there. Yeah. All right. We'll upload this video so other members can see it. We won't release this report because we've got to go out with our client tomorrow, and we're going to clean this report up a little bit more. This is the kind of the core of one part of the overall report. But once we reveal this report to their clients, which we'll be meeting with about 7 different fund management companies in Thailand, where I'll present the full report to them over an hour and take all their questions. And then we have 14 days that we can't publish the report. But after that 14 days, then we'll start sharing the different pieces of it with everybody in the group, with you guys. So, all right. We'll see you guys in the group. Take care. Bye. Yep.
Take care, Andrew. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Thoroughly
Good to see
enjoyed
you.
it.
Yeah.